Welcome to our DebSite conference presentation. I'm Nick Selser, my group mates Mariana, Salmeron, Reynoso, Ryan, Carney. We are doing What's Your Why? The engagement of teachers, family, peers, and self in nourishing a student's purpose. So a little overview of what we'll be sharing with you guys today. First, we'll hit what is the impact of purpose in the classroom, kind of our big overarching philosophical question. We'll define purpose, why it matters, based on literature that we have reviewed. And then we will go into how you can connect students to an environment that supports them in their passion and purpose, and similarly, how we can empower parents and peers to nourish students' purpose in those environments that we have connected them with. So firstly, what is the impact of purpose in the classroom? Why are we presenting on this particular subject? And so we're going to be basing our work off of Yeager et al.'s article, Boring But Important. And in that article, they give a really wonderful framework for purpose in the lens of student achievement and education. We have two types of purpose, self-interested and self-transcendent. You can kind of see where these terms go. Self-interested is purpose focused on a locus of benefit within oneself, i.e. wanting to do your math homework so you can become an engineer because it's stable and pays well. Self-transcendent purpose, on the other hand, has locus of benefit outside of oneself, i.e. wanting to do your math homework to become an engineer in order to build structures that will help people live better lives. It's fundamentally other-oriented. An important note that these things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. A self-interested purpose can be a place to start in the same way that we might think that sort of an achievement-based goal orientation is a place to start and get to mastery. We just want that our students do things within the framework of a self-transcendent sort of sense of purpose, so that they can best reap the benefits that the literature has shown that those things provide. So why does this matter? Kind of segueing off that point, there's two main points here that dovetail quite neatly. First is greater efficacy toward work and academic success. Yeager and his colleagues found that students who had a self-transcendent purpose worked harder, did better in their academic work. They had stronger goal orientation, they were persistent through difficult activities, and that process begot results. They did better in school. This runs sort of parallel to the development of academic virtue, because a self-transcendent purpose is going to be other-oriented, it's pro-social, it's built upon meaningful relationships and having a meaningful place within some semblance of a society, be that a family, a school, a community, a nation, what have you. And it gives a teleological structure to the way that students are working. There's an endpoint, and that endpoint isn't me. That endpoint is some greater good outside of me. And that is more robust. It's more durable when students are encountering things that are going to bump up against their own sort of self. Well, the self isn't the goal here. The other is the goal here. And that develops, again, that persistence in the classroom, which will lead to results and just strong personal virtues. It's pro-social and it's good for the community. And so having self-transcendent purpose in the classroom is good. Like, that's awesome. But self-transcendent purpose reinforced across several areas of life and by several authority figures is better. And this leads us into the main crux of what we are presenting on. We know that self-transcendent purpose is good. We want to figure out how we as teachers can help it be something that is not just in our classroom, but in a student's entire life. So how can we as teachers accomplish this? We can engage well in the context of our students' mesosystems following the work of Yuri Bronfenbrenner.
Our second major question here is how we as teachers can create an environment that supports students' purpose. So as Nick mentioned briefly in his section, there are many things and many systems that influence children's development. The psychologist Bronfenbrenner developed this theoretical framework to explain these systems. a piece of that is teachers. And as teachers, we don't have control over most of these systems. However, we do have control over our small piece of them. And so over the next couple of slides, we're going to be focusing on what we as teachers can control within our classrooms and within our relationships with our students that will help nourish their purpose. One way of framing this theoretically is through self-determination theory. Self-determination theory states that humans have three basic needs. An easy way to remember them is through the acronym CAR. These needs are competence, autonomy, and relatedness. To the extent in which teachers can support students' competence, autonomy, and relatedness within and outside of the classroom, that will help develop their intrinsic motivation, as well as connect them to a transcendent purpose. Here are three simple ways that teachers can support each of these basic human needs in the classroom. The first is through adding scaffolding into our instruction and assignments. Now, adding scaffolding is setting students up for success and not necessarily controlling everything that students do. Because another important psychological need is autonomy. Now, this doesn't mean letting students do whatever they want in the classroom, but rather setting up parameters, scaffolds, and within those parameters, giving students voice and choice as to how they complete assignments and how they express mastery over the material. A third psychological need is relatedness or relationship within students and between students and teachers. And teachers can support this psychological need by creating a pro-social class culture. John Dewey said that we don't just learn from experience, but we learn from reflecting on experience. And likewise, students learn about their purpose by reflecting on their purpose. Mariana is going to talk more about how reflecting on purpose can help students learn about it.
Okay, so in the next couple of slides, what we do is breaking down what that scaffolding in the classroom can look like so that we can provide that voice and choice and that guidance without excessive controlling. So the first part of this is how to scaffold students reflecting on their purpose. This is where teachers really want to start providing the language for students to think about their purpose before they start communicating it. This first happens with integrating purpose in the everyday language within curriculum. So we're meeting the psychological need for students to think abstractly and to start finding meaning in their curriculum. Again, finding this where students are not just focused on their own learning for themselves for a performance achievement like their own grade, but rather moving beyond themselves and connecting with other systems like their families or their community. So what are some examples of integrating this language? We have the tagline of College in Heaven, and we also start seeing how we can reference purpose within our curriculum. So for instance, if you are in teaching English or social studies, we're seeing is highlighting how different individuals throughout history or individuals and authors or in different pieces of writing, how are they themselves expressing their purpose? What language are they using? So really bringing the attention of students to that language. This comes in modeling how to use that language in different forms. The first part is in how we create goals and objectives for our students. And this is very important to focus on mastery goals over performance goals, like I mentioned earlier, grades. Mastery goals are lasting. They are starting to cultivate this lifelong learning that also moves beyond just one single subject, but really we're teaching the whole child. We're trying to help them connect goals within their personal life to what they're studying in class, to what they're doing in sports or in their artistic interests. We also recognize that the voice of teachers is not the only influence for students. Peers have incredible influence on each other. So if we give peers the right language to help them have conversation among themselves about what's their purpose, then they can help each other start finding or modeling for each other how to talk about their purpose. This can look like giving the chance for students to talk about their personal experiences, talking with each other in classroom discussions. Also, with the Catholic School Advantage, thinking about the saints and how their lives and their voices, their quotes, their prayers, how they taught us how to find our purpose and how to voice that. We can also use musicians and artists and athletes that our students look up to and use them as models for how to talk about purpose. Teachers themselves, they're still an authority figure that influence students. So doing talk alouds as teachers, sharing about our own purpose. How do we talk about our purpose as teachers, as individuals, and giving those students a way to connect with each other. And a place to jump off is with school values and mission statement. There is clear purpose-driven language in that. So that also helps students connect with the system of school and community, and they can use that as a jumping off point. So what does this look like now in scaffolding for the students to communicate this? So we modeled for them how to use the language. Now we want to give them the space to actually use it. So we're giving them different mediums. The first one, it comes in artistic output. Like we mentioned with music performances or athletes, we want to give the students now a space where they can share in their own words, in their own ways. As teachers, that's where when we assess our students with performance assessments, we are giving them the chance to share their purpose, again, not just in curriculum, but personally in their own way. And also those performance assessments can be shared with others in the classroom. And so other students can connect with it, bringing it back to how peers can influence each other. There's also mentorship. So the guidance from peers and adults, whether it's in classroom discussions, in activities, in retreats, in school, these are opportunities for that collaboration. And this mentorship can also happen across grades. It doesn't just have to be within the classroom. There's discussion in class. So when we are encouraging our students to ask questions, to engage with curiosity, and to also storytell. So teachers can do this in their own direct instruction where they get to tell their own stories and how they engage with the curriculum, but also giving the opportunity of class discussions and whether it's a Socratic seminar or something like that, where students themselves can engage in that storytelling and they can practice using that purposeful language. And finally, we talked about, again, the Catholic School Advantage, where cultivating spirituality really gives the students a space for them to reflect on their purpose beyond the curriculum. This can come up in reflecting on gratitude. What are we thankful for? Which can be as a prayer or just can be as a class community exercise, thinking about what we're grateful for. We give opportunities for journaling, for meditation, for individual prayer or community prayer, whether that's in mass or bringing each other's petitions out loud. This is the great space that we have for our students to reflect and again, to make those connections from what they're learning personally to how that's going to transcend into their communities, into their families, and into the future. Even though they might not know exactly what that looks like, these are spaces we can provide for them where they can start engaging with the language and the mediums on how to communicate that.
And finally, move on to the third question. How can we as teachers empower parents and peers to nourish students' purpose? The truth is that students need support in nourishing their purpose beyond our classroom. They don't exist in a vacuum. Rather, there are a series of networks that influence the adolescent's purpose, the two main networks being parents and peers. That being said, we as educators can play a role in attempting to influence the networks that surround the students in order to foster a larger network of support for our students in terms of their purpose. So we as educators, we need to make bonds with both the parents and their peers before we can even move forward into talking about how to empower them to nourish a student's purpose. Educators must have a positive relationship with the parents. That's easy to say, but it's difficult to do. But as much as our students value a loving and welcoming culture in the classroom, so do the parents. They value the same amount of things. And a few ways to make this loving and welcoming culture for parents can be from visiting the houses of students in the classroom, especially at the elementary level. Having good news calls. That means being able to call home when their student does something well in the classroom, rather than only calling home when it's about a discipline behavior or an academic problem. For ESL parents, become skilled in the language, or at the very least, use an interpreter to really connect with the parent and have conversations with them. For low socioeconomic status households, offering evening meals or commuters to go, something that just helps makes their lives easier, can make them feel loved and welcome at the school. These are just a few of the ways that make a positive relationship with the parents, but this is influential, and this is what we need to do in order to support our students in their purpose. The second being positive relationship with students. You need to create a classroom environment where students feel loved and welcome. You have to establish relationships early within the school year rather than later on. Make sure that they know that they're cared about from the moment they stepped in so that these positive relationships can flourish. You can allow the students to feel seen in the classroom, have them feel seen in the content, in the visual representations, in the posters. Everything around the classroom should reflect them and make them feel like they're a part of the classroom as well. These are just two quick tips on how to have positive relationships with students. There's plenty more, but we need to do this first before we can start discussing the purpose of having them help one another. So the importance of peers and purpose. We can do this by having a classroom culture. Again, we are the teachers, and most of the peers are going to be in our classroom. So it has been, if we establish a classroom culture where purpose is central, we'll be able to establish a way in which the peers can help one another in their search for purpose, in nourishing their purpose. And it has been shown that the teacher's motivational emphasis influences the goals of the peer group. So the things that the teacher cares about in their classroom can influence peer groups as a whole. So you can have a strong influence on the way peers interact with one another simply by the way you set up your classroom. Therefore, teachers' emphasis on purpose in the classroom can influence the peers group's perspective on purpose with one another. They can go home and start discussing their purposes, have different methods of dialogue about purpose, just strictly through this classroom culture that is set up. By giving students methods to reflect and communicate their purpose, educators are influencing the ways that peers nourish each other's purpose because they're all going through the same type of process. They're all reflecting the same type of ways that are given to them in the classroom, and they're communicating in the same type of language. They're understanding one another. And this is simply done by the methods that we talked about in this last question. And so that strong classroom culture has a strong influence on peers and how they interact with one another in terms of purpose. And why are peers important? Adolescents care about what their peers think, perhaps more than they care about anything else. That young middle school age, high school age, that is one of the top goals. And so, but importantly, friends are supporters of interest. The people you hang around with, only hang around with them because they support you. They care about you. Those are your friends for a reason. So the peers are supporters of the things that you like and what you want to do. And peers are top of mind for students. And another important thing is that perceived peer goals are more instrumental in shaping student goals than that of teachers. So what the peers think about goals, that's what's going to help shape the students' goals rather than that of just the teacher. But we also have parents, perhaps one of the most important factors of purpose. Family support is foundational for a student's purpose. They influence what purposes youth assume, what they care about. They influence how they should view purposes, how they should test themselves and assess themselves on reaching their purposes, whether they succeed or fail. That's influenced heavily by the parents. They influence the plans for making pursuits of purpose happen. If you can support a student through many failures or a child through many failures, they'll continue to try. But if you scold them for failing, maybe they'll give up on their purpose as well. So it depends. That's something heavily influenced by parents. And again, that goes for the student's confidence and enjoyment of purposeful pursuits. If they enjoy the purpose, if they're supported through their parents, they will more likely continue on with that purpose. And ultimately, parents play the strongest source of support for a student's purpose. They're the people who are going to be there for the student no matter what, ultimately. And that's the role played by parents. And so they heavily influence the purpose of a student. So what role can teachers play in supporting parents in the purpose? We have to build relationships. Back to that first key point. By building those positive relationships, only then can we educate parents on how to comprehend the language of purpose used in the classroom. If they understand the way we talk about purpose and how we cultivate in the classroom, they can take that home and then they get it from multiple different networks rather than just us as teachers. And we can educate parents on how to act on different methods of creating purpose, what they can do at home to help create this purpose and nourish it and cultivate it within our students.
So just to wrap up, we discussed now the definition of purpose, particularly self-transcendent purpose, and why it matters in the classroom, the benefits that it can bring for our students in their academics and in their growth as humans. We've then connected that to our understanding of the environments that support them, particularly parents and peers, and the role that teachers can play in first building up a student's self-transcendent purpose in and of itself, and then helping others do the same. Thank you for viewing our presentation. We look forward to answering your questions in the meetup. Have a great day.